Welcome to today's English presentation on traditional Swedish dishes. I will be guiding you today through three very regular Swedish dishes called Jansson's Temptation, fermented Baltic herring, and last but not least, Swedish meatballs. So, let's start out with Jansson's Temptation, also known as Jansson's Frestelse in Sweden. Jansson's Temptation is a gratin filled with potatoes, onions, and anchovies. You start off with peeling the potatoes and onions, and after you're done with the peeling, you cut the potatoes into nice long rods and the onions into rings. When that's been done, you put all your ingredients in a roasting tin and then you top it off with pouring milk and or cream over the mix to make it all nice and good. And voila, you just got yourself a perfect Jansson's Temptation. Jansson's Temptation is mostly served on a cold frigid evening, almost as a parting gift to your guests as they plan on going home. Though, that isn't always the case, but it often occurs. Jansson's Temptation is usually seen at the Christmas table in Sweden, and many people are often in doubt with eating Jansson's Temptation because of the anchovies and its salty flavor. But the trick is that the anchovies plays a big part in this traditional dish and gives it a fabulous taste in the end. The history behind Jansson's Temptation is somewhat special. It's said that there was an opera singer called Per Adolf Pelle Jansson who lived between the years of 1844 to 1889. He would treat his guests with beer, schnapps, and anchovy gratin, and this was the history behind the origin of Jansson's Temptation. And now, over to something that also has to do with fishes, fermented Baltic herring. Fermented Baltic herring, also known as surströmming in Sweden, is a very traditional dish and is a time of gathering with your family and your close ones. Fermented Baltic herring is what's mostly famous about the Swedish cuisine because of the preparation, the making of the so-called surströmmingslemma, which I'll get more into on later, and the stench, the foul and feared smell. The fermented Baltic herring comes in small tins where they lay to ferment, and when the tin starts to bulge, almost that it looks like it will explode, you know that it's ready to be served. People often tend to eat fermented Baltic herring outside because the stench will otherwise contaminate your house, and keeping all the doors closed will rarely keep the stench out. Fermented Baltic herring is only eaten in one way, and that is what's called a surströmmingslemma. What that is that first of all you need one special kind of bread, and that bread is only accepted, and that is tunnbröd, which literally means thin bread and looks like a big square. What you do then is that you take the thin bread and smear butter over it. When that is done, you take a boiled potato or two and you peel the potatoes and then mash them. What you want to do next is that you take your mashed potatoes and cover the thin bread with it, and don't forget to cover it with chopped onions as well. Before you put the main ingredient, the fermented Baltic herring, over your thin bread, you want to cleanse it, get all the yummy parts sorted and remove the things like the spleen and the scales, for example. And there you have it, your very own surströmmingslemma. As I said earlier, and with the Jansson's Temptation, this dish is usually served with a cold beverage like schnapps or beer, and during parties with your friends and close ones. The origin of fermented Baltic herring comes from the 16th century, where Swedish sailors were lacking enough salt to keep the fish fresh, and therefore it began to rot. The Swedish sailors came across some Finnish islanders and decided to trick them into buying their rotten fish. As time went on, the sailors came across the Finnish islanders again, and they were surprised as the islanders asked if they had more rotten fish, so the sailors decided to try it as well, and they enjoyed it too, and that was the origin of fermented Baltic herring. And now, over to something less foul and smelly, Swedish meatballs. Meatballs in general are made from an amount of ground meat with different kinds of ingredients, such as breadcrumbs, minced onion, spices, and sometimes egg. What you want to do with the ground meat is that you roll it into a small ball, and that's called a meatball. But meatballs in general is not what we're going to talk about here. No, we're going to look at how Swedes cook their meatballs. In Sweden, we make our meatballs from ground meat or a mix of ground beef, pork, or sometimes with veal. The meatballs are mixed with breadcrumbs soaked in milk and finely chopped and fried onions, broth, and cream. When the meatballs are done, you season them with salt and pepper or allspice. As for serving Swedish meatballs, you may want to complement your meatballs with gravy, boiled potatoes, and lingonberry jam. And that's how you make traditional Swedish meatballs. And that's it, folks, for today's English presentation on traditional Swedish dishes. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on the next episode of Traditional Swedish Dishes. Bye bye.